Ladies and gentlemen, when you're feeling constantly tired, emotionally depleted, or mentally foggy after spending time with certain people, you're likely encountering what many call the energy vampires. These individuals, whether consciously or not, feed off the emotional energy of others to sustain themselves, often leaving you feeling drained, frustrated, or even anxious. In the context of your video topic, of your being drained, understanding energy vampires is key to reclaiming your power and protecting your well-being. Energy vampires can take many forms. They might be friends, family members, co-workers, or even romantic partners. Some of them constantly complain, seek validation, or create drama to remain the center of attention. Others manipulate through guilt, passive aggression, or subtle emotional control. These behaviors are not always intentional or malicious, but the effect is the same. They sap your energy. You may notice that after an interaction with such individuals, you feel exhausted, unmotivated, or emotionally off balance. This is not in your imagination, it is your body and spirit responding to emotional overexertion. One of the reasons energy vampires are so draining is that they often lack healthy coping mechanisms. Instead of processing their emotions or facing their issues directly, they project their negative energy onto those around them. Because empathetic, kind-hearted people are more open, giving, they are frequently the primary targets. If you are someone who naturally listens, supports, and absorbs others' emotions, you are especially vulnerable to being energetically drained. Recognizing this pattern is the first step toward protecting yourself. The impact of energy vampires goes beyond emotional fatigue. Over time, being around such people can lead to chronic stress, lowered self-esteem, and even physical symptoms like headaches, insomnia, and anxiety. You might find yourself questioning your worth, losing focus on your goals, or simply lacking the drive you once had. These are all signs that your emotional boundaries are being violated and your personal energy is being compromised. To counteract this, it is essential to build awareness and set strong, healthy boundaries. Start by paying attention to how you feel during and after interactions with different people. Who leaves you feeling uplifted and inspired? Who leaves you feeling tense or heavy? Your emotional reactions are clues to your energetic well-being. When you identify the energy vampires in your life, it's important not to respond with anger or blame, but with clarity and assertiveness. Limiting time with draining individuals or learning how to disengage from their emotional pull is crucial. You do not need to be available to everyone all the time. Saying no is not selfish, it is a form of self-preservation. Protecting your peace may also involve more subtle shifts, like redirecting conversations, not offering unsolicited advice, or simply removing yourself from emotionally charged environments. Another powerful tool is energetic hygiene. Just like you shower daily to cleanse your physical body, you can also cleanse your energy field. Practices like meditation, grounding, journaling, or spending time in nature can help you release any emotional residue you've absorbed from others. Visualization exercises, such as imagining a protective light surrounding your body, can also reinforce your energetic boundaries and prevent further depletion. Ultimately, recognizing and dealing with energy vampires is about reclaiming control over your emotional landscape. It's about choosing who and what gets access to your energy. When you begin to protect your inner resources, you make space for healthier, more reciprocal relationships that nourish your spirit rather than drain it. You become more aligned, more empowered, and more attuned to what truly serves your growth and peace. You are not obligated to carry the emotional weight of others, especially at the expense of your own well-being. Learning to spot the signs and guard your energy is not just wise, it's vital. Because the truth is, your energy is sacred, and it's time you treated it that way. Emotional exhaustion is one of the most telling and dangerous signs that you're being drained, whether by your environment, your relationships, or the demands you place on yourself. It's more than just feeling tired. It's a deep, soul-level fatigue that lingers even after rest. When you're emotionally exhausted, simple tasks can feel overwhelming, motivation disappears, and joy becomes a distant memory. This state often creeps in silently, becoming your new normal before you even realize something is wrong. At the core of emotional exhaustion is chronic stress. When you're constantly giving your energy away, whether to people who take more than they give, to a job that doesn't fulfill you, or to situations that consistently push you beyond your limits, your emotional reserves begin to deplete. You may start feeling numb, disconnected, or hopeless. Your body and mind are signaling that something is out of balance. But because emotional exhaustion doesn't always come with physical symptoms, many people ignore it, pushing through until they reach complete burnout. One major cause of emotional exhaustion is overextending yourself emotionally in relationships. This often happens to people who are naturally empathetic and nurturing. You may find yourself always being the listener, the fixer, or the peacekeeper. While these roles may come from a good place, they can also be incredibly draining when they're not balanced with boundaries. Over time, giving more than you receive becomes unsustainable, and emotional exhaustion sets in. Another contributing factor is living inauthentically, suppressing your true feelings, desires, and identity to meet others' expectations. Whether it's saying yes when you want to say no, pretending everything is fine when it's not, or constantly seeking approval. This kind of emotional dissonance creates inner conflict. Your energy is spent trying to be someone you're not, and that drain leads directly to emotional burnout. Work and lifestyle can also play a significant role. High-pressure environments, lack of rest, constant digital stimulation, and the glorification of hustle culture all feed into emotional exhaustion. When you don't give yourself permission to slow down, to disconnect, or to feel your emotions fully, you slowly lose touch with your inner self. You may still be functioning outwardly, but inwardly you feel empty and depleted. Healing from emotional exhaustion starts with awareness. You must first acknowledge that your emotional energy is being depleted and identify where the drain is coming from. Who or what is demanding too much of you? Are you giving out of love or obligation? Once you recognize the sources, it becomes easier to make the necessary changes. Setting boundaries is crucial. That means learning to say no without guilt, limiting your exposure to draining people or situations, and prioritizing your own needs. It's about protecting your emotional energy like it's sacred, because it is. You also need to create space for rest and recovery, not just physically but emotionally. This could be through solitude, creative expression, nature, journaling, or seeking support from a therapist or trusted friend. Another key aspect is reconnecting with your inner self. When you are emotionally exhausted, you've often lost touch with your own desires, joy, and sense of purpose. Spend time each day tuning in. What do you need? What makes you feel alive? Even small actions that bring you back to yourself, like a quiet walk, go a few minutes deep breathing, or simply doing nothing, can begin to restore your energy. Ultimately, emotional exhaustion is not a weakness. It's a signal that you've been strong for too long without replenishing yourself. It's your soul's way of asking you to stop, reflect, and realign. Listen to that signal. You are not meant to be in a constant state of depletion. You deserve to feel whole, nourished, and vibrant. In protecting your emotional energy isn't selfish. It's essential. Toxic relationships are one of the most common and insidious sources of emotional, mental, and even physical drain. When you're in a toxic relationship, whether it's romantic, familial, professional, or even a friendship, you may find yourself constantly giving, constantly apologizing, or constantly questioning your own worth. Over time, this kind of dynamic slowly chips away at your self-esteem and depletes your energy, leaving you feeling exhausted, confused, and emotionally numb. What makes a relationship toxic isn't always obvious at first. Sometimes, it starts subtly. Small comments that undermine your confidence, manipulative behaviors disguised as concern, or a persistent imbalance where your needs are consistently overlooked. Toxic individuals often thrive on control, guilt, and emotional dependency. They may love bomb you one moment and belittle you the next, creating an emotional roller coaster that leaves you disoriented and drained. You may begin to feel like you're walking on eggshells, carefully managing your behavior to avoid conflict, rejection, or emotional backlash. A major red flag of a toxic relationship is the constant feeling that you're never good enough. No matter how much you give, how much effort you put in, or how much you try to please the other person, it's never reciprocated or appreciated. You may feel obligated to constantly explain yourself or seek validation, and this emotional labor becomes deeply exhausting. In a healthy relationship, you feel supported, safe, and respected. In a toxic one, you feel anxious, invalidated, and emotionally unsafe. Another sign of toxicity is the loss of your identity. Toxic relationships often require you to shrink yourself to maintain peace. You might stop pursuing your goals, expressing your opinions, or being your true self because the other person either dismisses your needs or punishes you for asserting them. Over time, this leads to emotional fatigue and a disconnection from who you really are. You begin to doubt your feelings, your intuition, and your decisions because your inner compass has been so manipulated. One of the most exhausting parts of a toxic relationship is the emotional confusion it causes. These relationships are often characterized by a cycle of highs and lows. One day you feel loved or valued, and the next you're treated with indifference or cruelty. This unpredictability keeps you emotionally hooked, constantly chasing the good moments and trying to fix the bad ones. It creates a trauma bond, where you're mentally and emotionally tied to someone who is harming you. This bond is hard to break because it mimics love and attachment, but it's actually built on fear, guilt, and emotional manipulation. Escaping a toxic relationship begins with recognition. You have to acknowledge that the dynamic is not healthy, no matter how long you've been in it or how deeply involved you are. This can be painful, especially if the toxic person is someone you care about deeply. But your well-being must come first. It's not selfish to choose peace. It's not wrong to protect your energy. Setting boundaries is essential. That might mean limiting contact, creating emotional distance, or walking away entirely. These actions are not easy, but they are necessary for healing. Surround yourself with people who support your growth, respect your boundaries, and uplift your spirit. Reconnect with your own needs, desires, and inner voice. The more you rebuild your relationship with yourself, the more clarity and strength you will have to leave behind what drains you. You deserve relationships that nourish you, not ones that deplete you. Love should never hurt more than it heals. When you remove yourself from toxicity, you don't just survive, you begin to thrive. Reclaim your energy, your worth, and your peace. That is the beginning of true freedom. Burnout is a state of deep emotional, mental, and physical exhaustion that often results from prolonged stress and overwhelming demands, especially when those demands consistently outweigh your ability to cope. It is more than just being tired or overworked. Burnout is a signal that your inner resources have been depleted, and if not addressed, it can impact every aspect of your life, your health, your relationships, your work, and your sense of self. When you're being drained, whether by work, people, responsibilities, or even your own inner expectations, burnout creeps in quietly. It may start with fatigue that doesn't go away with rest, or a lack of motivation for things you once enjoyed. You might begin to feel emotionally numb, unable to connect deeply with others, and burdened by even small tasks. There's a persistent sense of heaviness, as if you're moving through life with weights on your shoulders. You wake up feeling tired, go to bed feeling tired, and in between you're functioning on autopilot. One of the most overlooked causes of burnout is the emotional toll of constantly giving more than you receive. If you are the person who always shows up, who always says yes, who carries emotionally or physically, you might reach a point where your own cup is empty. Compassion fatigue is a real and painful part of burnout, especially for those who are empathetic, nurturing, or in caregiving roles. It can feel like your kindness is being stretched beyond its limits, with little support in return. The burnout also thrives in environments where your efforts are unrecognized or unrewarded. Whether it's a job that demands too much without appreciation, or a relationship where you feel invisible despite your effort, this lack of acknowledgement erodes your spirit over time. You begin to question your worth, your abilities, and your purpose. The mind spirals into self-doubt and cynicism, which are hallmark symptoms of burnout. The physical signs of burnout can be just as severe. Chronic headaches, insomnia, digestive issues, lowered immunity, and even chest pain can all result from sustained stress. Your body begins to break down under the pressure, sending clear signals that something needs to change. Yet many people ignore these signs, pushing through the pain in an effort to keep up with life's demands. The result is often a crash, a total shutdown where your body and mind simply can't function anymore. One of the most damaging aspects of burnout is how it distorts your perception. It convinces you that you're weak, lazy, or incapable, when in reality, you're simply exhausted. It tells you to try harder, give more, and keep going, even when every part of you is crying out for rest. Burnout doesn't mean you're failing. It means you've been strong for too long without proper care. Healing from burnout starts with awareness. You must first admit that you are drained. This is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of self-awareness. From there, give yourself permission to rest. Not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. Create space in your life to breathe, to reflect, to be still. Set boundaries that protect your energy and learn to say no without guilt. Reconnect with activities that bring you joy, peace, and a sense of fulfillment, not just productivity. You don't have to earn your rest. You don't have to prove your worth through exhaustion. Your value isn't measured by how much you carry for others. When you begin to prioritize your well-being, you rebuild your inner power. Burnout is a message, not a verdict. It's telling you that something in your life needs to shift. Listen to it, honor it, and from that space of compassion and awareness, begin the journey back to yourself. Boundaries are essential for protecting your energy, your peace, and your well-being, especially when you feel like you're being drained. Without clear and firm boundaries, you open yourself up to emotional, mental, and even physical exhaustion. When people take more than they give, when obligations pile up without pause, or when your environment constantly demands your attention and effort, it's easy to lose track of where you end and others begin. This loss of clarity is exactly where the draining begins. A boundary is not a wall, it's a gate. It doesn't block love, connection, or kindness, it regulates them. It ensures that your energy is directed in healthy, reciprocal ways and that you're not pouring from an empty cup. When you feel constantly tired, resentful, or overwhelmed, it's often a sign that your boundaries have been crossed, or perhaps never established in the first place. Saying yes when you mean no, tolerating disrespect, overextending yourself, or ignoring your own needs are all forms of self-betrayal that slowly wear you down. Being drained isn't just about what you do, it's also about what you allow. If you allow people to overstep, to use your time without appreciation, to project their emotional burdens onto you without boundaries, you begin to lose energy. Not just physically, but spiritually. You begin to feel unseen, unheard, and overexposed. Your soul feels tired because you haven't created space to be restored. Boundaries are the container that holds your worth, your energy, and your identity intact. Learning to set boundaries is an act of self-respect. It requires you to tune into your inner voice and honor your limits. It may feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you've been conditioned to people please or fear conflict. You might worry that you'll disappoint others, or that you'll come off as selfish. But the truth is, when you neglect your boundaries, you're teaching people how to treat you. And often, you're teaching that you will accept being drained. Start small. Practice saying no without apology. Take time for yourself even if others don't understand. Remove yourself from environments that constantly deplete you. Stop explaining your decisions to people who don't respect your needs. Remember, a boundary doesn't need permission to be valid. It doesn't require validation from others. It only requires clarity from you. One of the most empowering shifts you can make is realizing that it's not your job to carry everyone's emotions, solve everyone's problems, or be available all the time. You are not a limitless source of energy. You are human. And like anything valuable, you need to be protected and honored. Boundaries allow you to give from a place of fullness rather than depletion. They allow you to show up with authenticity, not obligation. When you begin to enforce healthy boundaries, you'll likely experience resistance. People who benefited from your lack of limits may push back. They may try to guilt-trip you, question your intentions, or accuse you of changing. That's because boundaries disrupt unhealthy dynamics, but the discomfort is temporary. The peace that follows is lasting, and those who truly care about you will adjust, respect, and even appreciate your new sense of self-respect. Boundaries are not a sign of disconnection. They are a foundation for genuine, balanced connection. They allow relationships to flourish because they are built on mutual respect rather than silent resentment. They empower you to protect your mental space, your emotional clarity, and your physical health. In a world that constantly demands more of you, having boundaries is a radical act of self-care. If you're feeling drained, pause and reflect. Ask yourself where in your life are your boundaries too loose, too blurred, or non-existent. Where do you feel obligated rather than inspired? Begin there. Choose yourself, not out of selfishness, but out of a deep understanding that your energy is sacred. Boundaries are not barriers. They are bridges to a healthier, more sustainable version of you. Overgiving is one of the most common yet overlooked reasons why you may be feeling emotionally, mentally, and even physically drained. At first glance, giving might seem like a beautiful quality, and it is. But when giving becomes excessive, unbalanced, or rooted in a need for approval, it begins to cost more than it contributes. Overgiving is not a sign of love, strength, or generosity. It's often a symptom of unhealed wounds, lack of boundaries, and a distorted sense of self-worth. When you give more than you receive on a consistent basis, your emotional tank begins to run on empty. You may find yourself constantly showing up for others, offering time and attention, advice, or support, often without being asked. You're the one people rely on. The one who says yes even when you're exhausted. The one who puts everyone else first because that's what you've always done. At first, it may feel good to be needed. But eventually, overgiving leads to resentment, burnout, and a quiet sense of invisibility. Many people who overdo so because deep down, they're trying to earn love, acceptance, or validation. They may have grown up in environments where love was conditional, given when they performed pleased or sacrificed. As a result, the giving becomes a way to feel worthy. But here's the hard truth: when your value is tied to how much you give, you lose sight of who you are without your usefulness. You begin to feel like your worth depends on being everything to everyone, all the time. Overgiving can also be a defense mechanism. If you're busy taking care of others, you don't have to confront your own pain, needs, or fears. If you're always focused outward, you can avoid the discomfort of turning inward. But in doing so, you create a dangerous imbalance. You silence your own voice while amplifying everyone else's. You deny your own needs while meeting everyone else's. And over time, that imbalance drains not just your energy, but your sense of identity. When you're in the habit of overgiving, it becomes difficult to receive. Compliments, help, love, support, they all feel unfamiliar or undeserved. You brush them off or feel uncomfortable because you're so used to being the one who gives, not the one who gets. But the truth is, healthy relationships are built on reciprocity, not sacrifice. You are not meant to constantly pour into others without ever being poured into yourself. You are not a well with infinite depth, you have limits. And honoring those limits is not selfish, it's necessary. Breaking the cycle of overgiving begins with awareness. Pay attention to when you say yes out of guilt, obligation, or fear rather than genuine desire. Notice when you give even when your body is tired, your mind is overwhelmed, or your heart feels empty. Start asking yourself, am I giving because I want to, or because I feel I have to? That small question can shift everything. You must also begin to value your time and energy as much as you value others. Set boundaries, not as a way to push people away, but as a way to preserve your peace. Learn to say no with love and firmness. Practice receiving without apology. Start believing that you are worthy, not because of what you do for others, but because of who you are. Remember, you cannot give from a place of depletion and expect your kindness to flourish. The most impactful giving comes from a place of fullness. It comes from a place where your needs are met, your energy is protected, and your worth is no longer tied to your sacrifices. Overgiving is not love. It's a slow erosion of self. And the first step to reclaiming your energy is realizing that your value is not in how much you give, but in how deeply you honor yourself. Self-care is not a luxury, it is a necessity, especially when you find yourself feeling emotionally, mentally, and physically drained. In a world that constantly demands more time, more effort, more giving, it's easy to forget that you too need nurturing. When you're being drained, whether by toxic relationships, overworking, emotional stress, or even your own inner critic, self-care becomes the critical lifeline that reconnects you to your center and replenishes your energy. Being drained often happens gradually. You may not notice the signs right away. You might feel a little more tired than usual, a bit less motivated or more irritable. Then, before you know it, you're running on fumes, struggling to show up for even the simplest tasks. This is your body and mind's way of waving a red flag, telling you that something is out of balance. And too often, the missing piece is self-care. A true self-care is not just bubble baths and spa days, although those can be helpful. It's about consciously creating space for rest, reflection, and healing. It's about setting boundaries and learning to say no when something is too much. It's about listening to your own needs instead of silencing them to accommodate others. When you begin to feel drained, self-care is the act of turning inward and asking, "What do I need right now?" and then honoring the answer. One of the reasons many people neglect self-care is because of guilt. We've been conditioned to believe that taking time for ourselves is selfish or indulgent. But the truth is, neglecting yourself doesn't help anyone. You can't pour from an empty cup. You can't show up fully for others if you're constantly running empty. By practicing self-care, you're not only helping yourself, you're showing up stronger, healthier, and more grounded in every area of your life. Self-care also involves emotional boundaries. When you're constantly giving your energy to others, whether it's through listening to their problems, supporting their dreams, or managing their emotions, you risk becoming energetically depleted. It's important to know when to step back and recharge. You're not responsible for fixing everyone else, and part of self-care is recognizing when your compassion turns into self-sacrifice. Another essential part of self-care is managing your inner world. That includes your thoughts, beliefs, and the way you speak to yourself. Negative self-talk is one of the most draining things you can carry. If you're constantly criticizing yourself, doubting your worth, or pressuring yourself to be perfect, you're creating an environment of inner stress. Self-care means replacing that inner critic with a voice of kindness, encouragement, and patience. It means giving yourself grace when you're struggling and celebrating yourself when you succeed. Taking care of your physical health is also a form of self-care that directly impacts your energy. Sleep, nutrition, movement, and hydration are foundational. When your body is run down, your mind and emotions suffer too. You don't have to follow a perfect routine, but small, intentional acts, like drinking water first thing in the morning, taking a walk, or getting a full night's sleep, can radically change the way you feel. The more you practice self-care, the more in tune you become with your energy. You'll begin to notice who drains you and who uplifts you. You'll feel when a situation is out of alignment or when you're betraying your own needs. And most importantly, you'll develop the courage to choose yourself. Not out of selfishness, but out of self-respect. If you're being drained, it's time to come back to yourself. Slow down, breathe, listen. Take one small action today that nourishes you, whether it's resting, journaling, going for a walk, or simply saying no. Self-care is the reminder that your well-being matters, that your energy is sacred, and that you are worthy of care not just from others, but from yourself, first and foremost. Mental fatigue is one of the most overlooked signs that you are being drained. Unlike physical exhaustion, which can often be recognized easily by the body, mental fatigue creeps in quietly. It shows up as a lack of motivation, trouble focusing, forgetfulness, and even emotional numbness. If you're constantly feeling tired but can't seem to figure out why, chances are your mind is overloaded, and this is your internal alarm letting you know something needs to change. We live in a world that celebrates productivity, hustle, and constant stimulation. From the moment we wake up, our minds are bombarded with information. Notifications, emails, social media, news, conversations, expectations. We rarely get a moment to pause, breathe, or reflect. When your brain doesn't get that downtime, it begins to burn out. Mental fatigue is what happens when your mind becomes so overloaded that it starts to shut down to protect itself. Being mentally drained affects every part of your life. It impacts your decision-making abilities, your creativity, your memory, and even your emotional regulation. You might find yourself becoming irritable over small things, zoning out during important conversations, or procrastinating even the tasks you used to enjoy. This isn't laziness. It's a sign that your mental resources have been depleted, and the longer you ignore it, the deeper it gets. One of the major causes of mental fatigue is emotional labor. This happens when you're constantly managing your own emotions and the emotions of those around you. If you're the kind of person who's always listening to other people's problems, trying to keep the peace, or suppressing your true feelings to avoid conflict. You're likely carrying an invisible mental burden. Over time, this emotional strain can leave you feeling drained, unappreciated, and even resentful. Another factor is decision fatigue. Every day we make thousands of decisions. What to wear, what to eat, how to respond to a message, how to handle a work situation. Each decision, no matter how small, uses mental energy. When you're constantly multitasking or dealing with stress, your brain has to work even harder to stay afloat. Eventually, it starts to shut down non-essential functions just to survive. That's when the brain fog, indecisiveness, and lack of focus kick in. To recover from mental fatigue, you need to be intentional about rest. Not just physical rest, but mental and emotional rest. This doesn't mean scrolling on your phone or watching TV for hours, which can sometimes add to the noise. It means giving your brain true downtime, silence, nature, deep breathing, meditation, journaling, or simply doing nothing. These are not luxuries. They are requirements for a healthy, functioning mind. Setting boundaries is also critical. If you are constantly saying "I's" when you want to say no, taking on more than you can handle, or surrounding yourself with people who drain your energy, mental fatigue is inevitable. You have to protect your mental space as fiercely as you protect your physical health. That means limiting exposure to negativity, turning off unnecessary notifications, and allowing yourself to step away without guilt. Mental fatigue is also your soul's way of telling you something isn't aligned. Maybe you're in a job that doesn't fulfill you, a relationship that drains you, or a lifestyle that pushes you beyond your limits. Your exhaustion might not just be about doing too much. It might be about doing too much of what doesn't light you up. Reconnecting with your values, your purpose, and your passions can breathe life back into your tired mind. If you're being drained and mental fatigue is setting in, it's time to pause, reevaluate what's taking your energy. Prioritize rest, silence, and simplicity. Your peace of mind is not negotiable. You don't have to wait until you break down to start healing. The moment you choose to listen to your exhaustion instead of pushing past it, that's the moment you begin to reclaim your power.